All right, all right, all right. Welcome to the show, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. If this is your first experience on a Learn Around the World virtual field trip, this is an interactive show for everyone out there today. If you're one of our on-camera guests or you're not on camera watching from the outside today, this is still interactive. So please send in your questions early and often. You can do that in two ways. You can do it with the Q&A app built in the bottom of your Zoom window that you're watching in now. You can also send in your text questions using Twitter. If you are a Twitter user, just use the hashtag GEOshow. I'm only following the hashtag. Do not @ me. I will not see those questions. We also use Kahoot right here on the GEOshow. So go to kahoot.it on any web browser. You can play as a classroom on your teacher's device, or you can play as one-to-one if you have the devices. And enter in today's game pin, which is 3628834, and follow along. If you win our quiz at the end of the show, then you'll win a postcard from me, GOB, from the Learn Around the World Studios. Also, if you are stump me on any questions, great. That means you're asking fantastic, well thought out questions. I don't know every single fact there is to know about all of these natural wonders. However, if I do need to research something further, I will post those answers over at flipgrid.com/GeoShow. All right, well, it is that time of the day. So, explorers, are you guys ready?
Yeah.
All right, GeoShow is now live. Let's do it, guys. All right. Welcome to the GeoShow, and the title of today's program is Natural Wonders of Southern Mexico. Brought to you by Learn Around the World. We're kicking off today's show using Kahoot. If you've never used Kahoot before, or if you've never used it on the GeoShow before, this is how we use it. First, you only get 10 seconds to answer a question. Not a lot of time, explorers, so you have to be quick with your decision making. Also, if you've never used Kahoot, you're going to see a question and the answer up here on the board where you see me right now. It will not be on your device, so don't stick your head right in your device. You must look up at the screen in order to see the question and the answer. And if you're super quiet in class, you'll hear me read the question as well. Well, let's go ahead and practice it, okay? So go ahead and grab your devices if you're playing along today. We have a lot of people already signed in. If you're not logged in yet, don't worry. We're not going to start awarding points until later on in the show. So it's okay if you miss the first couple ones. Again, that game pin is 3628834. All right, today's first question is, we're going to Mexico, but where is it? Is it in Europe, South America, Africa, or North America? What do you guys think? All right, it is in North America. Green. So so Mexico is south of the United States, but North America technically goes all the way from Canada all the way down to Panama, and then we have South America that starts. So there are other countries besides the USA and Canada in North America, and Mexico is definitely one of those. All right, so now we know where it is. Well, let's find out exactly if you're still confused. We're going to go to our map. Because you're watching the GeoShow, we are a geography-based program. That means location matters, explorers. So let's go ahead and spin our big blue ball on that we're all zooming around the universe on. And we're going to zoom into southern Mexico today. Now, keep in mind, Mexico is a very large country with many, many natural wonders. And we don't have time to see all of those today, so we're only going to see a select few. And two of those are going to be in the state of Oaxaca. So Oaxaca is a state. They have states, not provinces, in Mexico. And we're going to see Yerbe el Agua, which means boiling water. We're also going to see Árbol del Tule, which is the widest tree in the world. And we're also going to the eastern part of southern Mexico, to the Yucatan Peninsula. So if you remember from geography class, peninsulas are a body of land surrounded on three sides by water. And we're going to see a natural wonder called cenotes. And actually, there are many of these. So around 5,000 or so cenotes can be found in the Yucatan Peninsula. We're going to see one up here, which is a big underwater river system called Dos Ojos. And we're also going to see some open cenotes. So this is what they look like from the sky. But basically, I'm showing you these because they're like a big pool or sinkhole. And these water, because of the rock that's found in the Yucatan, is called limestone, and it's really porous. It means it's like a sponge. So water can travel through the rock back and forth between the ocean and some of these cenotes. So some of them are actually filled with salt water. Some of them are filled with fresh water. So we'll talk about those when we get to cenotes. And again, here they on our map. These are our locations we're visiting today, and all that and more on today's Geo Show. Before we get started, we do want to introduce our on-camera guest classroom we have with us today, which is Mrs. Flynn's fourth graders from Eamon, South Carolina. Welcome to the show, guys. Hello. All right, so they're pumped up over in South Carolina. And do you happen to have a fun fact that you would like to share with us today?
Right, buddy.
It's actually one of the ones we did, the Hirvana Agua thingy. It's a set of natural rock formations in the Mexican state of Oaxaca that resembles cascades of water.
All right, so it resembles cascades of water. What's cascade mean?
I don't know.
So a cascade is like we could use that instead of waterfall. So it looks like a waterfall. So it looks like a cascade or a waterfall. So what we're going to see at Yerve El Agua, we're going to see rock formations that look like waterfalls or they look like cascades. All right, great fun fact there. Welcome to everyone watching from South Carolina. We're going to give a couple of random shout outs on the show. Let's going to start off with Wilder Elementary School in Ohio. Big shout out to everyone watching from Ohio today. And let's do another one right now with Southside School in Tennessee. Big shout out to you guys as well. And we'll give a shout out as well to Amina Shellman. Shout out to you doing this as a extra credit class, it looks like. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to see one of those natural wonders to start off with. So Arbol del Tule, the widest tree in the world, Yerve El Agua, which means boiling water, or cenotes, underwater river systems and sinkholes. But which one are we going to do first? You are going to decide, and you're going to do that using Kahoot. So if you're playing along today, go ahead and grab your device. This is a Choose Your Own Adventure program, and we're going to talk about what you want to talk about first. That's right. So let's do it. What do you want to learn about first? Do you want to learn about cenotes, Arbol del Tule, or Yerve El Agua? All right, so it looks like we're going to Yerve El Agua, which means boiling water, but it's not really hot water, which we're going to learn about. So the water is actually quite cool. It just has the effect of looking like boiling water as it's coming out of the ground. All right, so we're going to start out today over in the state of Oaxaca. So in Oaxaca is a place called Yerve El Agua. And so what we're going to do is we'll virtually park at the parking lots, and we're going to walk down to the top of a cliff. So this white area that you see here is the top of a cliff, and all of the brown area down here is at the bottom of the cliff. But what are we going to see on those cliffs? We're going to see some natural springs. You see these stars here? That's where the water is bubbling up or boiling out of the ground is what it looks like. But again, it's not really hot. And that water gets trapped in pools. And there's two types of pools. There are man-made pools or artificial pools and natural pools that collect this water and holds the water. But as this water fills up, it will pour over the edge of the pools, both man-made and natural, and eventually it will pour over the edge of the cliff. And when it pours over the edge of the cliff, this water leaves behind minerals that causes a rock formation to look like a waterfall or a cascade. And that's where we get these rock formations at Yerve El Agua. So before we get started, let me just go ahead and briefly mention this because we're going to talk a lot about this today. And that is the idea or how the process of a solid gets dissolved into a liquid. Again, a solid gets dissolved into a liquid. So a common example of this is if I had a glass of water and if I pour salt in here or sugar or Kool-Aid, let's have something fun, why not? And if we stir it around, that solid will dissolve into the water. And well, what happens if we boil that water? Well, as the water evaporates and turns into gas, it leaves those solids behind. So if you have a big old pot of salt water and you boil it till all the water's out of it, it's going to leave salt. Well, same thing happens here. Is down below ground, that water dissolves minerals from rocks. So minerals are the ingredients that make up rocks. And one big one is calcium that is found in limestone that we're going to talk about today. So calcium is dissolved in that water, and as water bubbles up and that water evaporates in the sky, it leaves behind minerals that makes rock formations. And that's what we're going to see at Yerba El Agua. So let's go ahead and do it. Abracadabra. We are now in Mexico. I hope everyone has their passports with them today. And as you can see, the environment here and is very, it's a hot and dry environment. And it's quite beautiful with the rolling mountains. Now, when you pay to enter the site here, it's just like going into a park. We see a farmer walking by with some livestock. And this scenery here provides a very beautiful backdrop for these cascading rock formations that we see right here. So this is at Yerba El Agua. And so we're going to go walk over here on top of the cliff. But up here where these springs of water are bubbling up out of the ground, what happens is as the water rolls down the side of the cliff and evaporates into the sky, it leaves behind these minerals that make these larger rock formations. So it kind of looks like a frozen waterfall or a frozen cascade, but it's not. It's actually a hard rock is what that formation is, which is really neat. So when you zoom in closer to it, you may see, recognize different colors. Those are just different types of minerals. And when we look all around on top of the cliff, we're going to see two different kinds of pools. So these very large pools that we see that everyone comes and goes swimming in here and takes a break from the heat, because remember, the water here is not actually boiling. It's not hot at all. In fact, it's actually quite cool. But these deeper pools that we see are man-made. So people have put artificial walls to dam up, just like a beaver makes a dam, right? To dam up the water to have deep swimming pools here. So here we get our first look of why it's called Yerba El Agua, right? So it has the effect of water boiling out of the ground. And it's not really boiling, but what's happening is it's the pressure. It's the pressure from the water that's pushing up. And that's what's making it bubble in the ground. It's just like if you took a water hose and turned it on and stuck a water hose straight up into the sky, it's going to bubble up and fall back down, right? So that's the same idea here, is down below ground, water is bubbling up out of the ground because of pressure, not because of heat so much. And that's why it has the effect of boiling water. All right, so when we look at it, and we can kind of follow with our eyes over the cliff here. So as this water trickles down the edge of the cliff, all around the edges, or when the water evaporates up, it's going to leave minerals as the water turns into gas. It's going to leave those solids behind. All right. If you've never tried this, guys, you can try this, especially our younger classrooms. It's a great experiment to do. Is you can take glasses of water and see how much salt or sugar you can dissolve into a glass of water, and you can dissolve more things if you stir the water or you heat the water up. So it's a really cool project to do. So here's some of the springs, and that spring water, it does pour down over the side of the cliff, and it also gets pulled up on top of the cliff. And these are the natural pools. So the natural pools that we see are quite small. They're kind of smaller puddles of water technically. And this one up here is a man-made pool. So you can kind of see the effect, those straight perpendicular walls going straight up and down. Those were designed by people. People built those. And it looks natural because the water pours over those man-made walls, and it makes them it leaves, just like it's doing over the side of the cliff, it is leaving minerals on top of those brick and cinder block walls as well. And so it's quite a popular place to come to because of the scenery. We can see how beautiful those cascading formations look out with this the backdrop of this beautiful landscape here. And so when we look at it, again, many of the pools are man-made, but the water is coming from a natural spring. And as that water pours down, it leaves behind minerals on the walls here, which makes it look kind of natural, but this is really a man-made wall. And these are the natural pools down here before it goes over the edge of the cliff. So here's a great shot of those. And when it goes over the edge of the cliff, you always want to be careful as you come to places like this around the world. Many of you will have places like this near your home where you can go hiking in the mountains. And if you go to places that are kind of off of the beaten path, for lack of better words, then you're not always going to have safe railings and things where you go to some kind of high tourist areas. Sometimes you'll see railings to keep people safe. Well, as we explore the world, we always want to be we like to say on the GEOshow, we want to be not to leave a trace where we go, and we also want to be safe. So one thing you want to keep in mind if you are visiting places that are high up, you always want to stay way back from the edge. Also, when it's wet, like here, it's when things are wet, they become slick. So you definitely don't want to be near an edge on a wet, slick surface. Okay, here's a great shot of those rock formations that are cascading down the side of the cliff. And again, that's hard rock that we see. Very popular place to visit. There was a local school that was actually doing their class pictures here when we were there on our expedition. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up the floor for some questions. So if you haven't done so yet, get those sent in. The cliffs are cool. Yes, they are cool. And let's see, do you know how many square miles long Mexico is? I don't know. And I try to have a lot of facts prepared for our particular topics. It's a quick search. That one's a real easy one to find, to go look up how many square miles Mexico is. I just don't know off the top of my head. Let's go and start in Mrs. Flynn's classroom. And do you guys have a question for us so far?
Question. Got a question?
Are there many dangerous animals there?
Many dangerous animals? Yeah, there are animals in Mexico that can be dangerous to humans, of course. For example, let's say in southern Mexico, in Oaxaca, when we get let's start top down. So predators, right? Apex predators, mountain lions are found in Mexico, and then when you get closer to the rainforest, jaguars are found in Mexico as well. So not as common as they once were, but they are found here, and those could be dangerous to humans, of course. And then you have I'm not familiar with all of the venomous species, but I would be willing to bet that there are venomous snakes in Mexico as well. I just don't know all of the species off the top of my head. All right, great question there. And so, yes, that's a great point that you bring up, is not only do we need to be careful where we go in the world and because of like things that may be high up, but you do want to do your research. So when you go to new areas around the world, you want to research, are there dangerous animals that you need to watch out for, like venomous snakes or spiders, for example, things that you need to know what they look like so you know not to touch them. And sometimes people don't think about this often, but poisonous plants. Think about poison ivy, right? Imagine if you never heard of poison ivy and then you come to the United States and you're rubbing it all over yourself. I don't know why you would rub plants all over yourself, but if you did that, you would not be a happy person, right? So those are things we need to keep in mind, and great idea, guys. All right, so also coming in, we have Mrs. Patton's classroom wants to know, how do you get up to Yerve El Agua, coming from Samantha? So if you go to If you visit to Oaxaca, you can take their tour groups. You can go there yourself, but you would need some type of vehicle. It's kind of off in the out of the way from the city of Oaxaca, for example. But you would need to travel there somehow. And then once you travel there, as you saw us go through the pay gate, there's a parking lot. Then you just hike. You actually hike down to the top of the cliff because the parking area is actually above it. So you don't actually hike up to it. So yeah, there we go. Okay, so keep those questions coming in. We're going to go ahead so we keep things moving along and talk about another natural wonder found in southern Mexico. And you're going to decide what that second topic is today. That is going to be either Arbol del Tule, the widest tree in the world, or we can go to the Yucatan and talk about cenotes. And you're going to decide right about now. So go ahead and grab your devices if you're playing along on Kahoots. Don't forget to get logged in with that game pin today, which is 362-8834. Get ready for that quiz that's coming up shortly. All right. Next up we have, what do you want to learn about next? Choose your own adventure, explorers. All right, looks like we are talking about cenotes. So we're going to go to the eastern parts of southern Mexico, to the Yucatan Peninsula. And as we do, we're going to give another shout out here. Let's do, how about Interlakes Middle and High School from New Hampshire? Big shout out to everyone watching from New England today. All right, so we're going to go back to southern Mexico and talk about cenotes. So there are several types of cenotes. Basically, and I get this question a lot, but cenotes are just the term that's used to talk about these two types of, basically they're sinkholes and they're underwater river systems, like underwater caves. And we can find these all around the world, but in this area, Mexico, the term they've been called for a long, long time is cenotes. And cenotes, there are a lot of them here. In fact, even the underwater river systems, 7 of the top 10 longest underwater rivers in the world are found in the Yucatan. So it's a great place to come and see cenotes. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about them. So first off, there's 3 different types or 3 categories of cenotes. There's open, semi-closed, and closed. The first kind is open, and this is an example of an open cenote. And you can see right here, they're called open because they are, in fact, open. It's like a pot with the lid off of it, right? So it's open to the air. And these open ones are like just big sinkholes. And so the way that they form is, if we look in the background here, this rock, you see how this rock has holes all in it? So this rock, the rock that we find in the Yucatan, is limestone. And limestone has a lot of minerals in it that dissolves easily into water. So water just cuts right through this stuff. And now it takes a long, long time, thousands and thousands of years, that is cutting through and making these underwater caves and these big sinkholes. But when we look at them, the open cenotes, these were a source because there are no rivers found in the Yucatan. So all the rivers are underground and are running through the rock in these underwater river systems. So there's no above ground rivers like you and I would be used to near our homes typically. So these cenotes were very important to the indigenous peoples of the area, the Maya, and they're important today because they are a source of fresh water. So this is how the people have gotten water in this area of the world for a long, long time. And they were also important in the old days here. This is near Chichen Itza, a very famous Maya city. And this was used as for rituals as well. So artifacts have been found in the bottom of this particular cenote. Also, remains of humans and animals have been found at the bottom of this cenote as well. The second type of cenote is a semi-closed cenote. So semi-closed just means it's part closed and part open. So we're going to see one of these today as well. And the third type is a closed cenote, and that's when it's completely underground. So it's truly an underwater cave. And what we'll see is the one that we'll see today does have a small opening in it, but is still considered a closed cenote. All right, so we're going to head to the eastern part of southern Mexico to the Yucatan Peninsula. Again, there's no rivers found on the peninsula, so all the fresh water is found in these cenotes. And there's two main areas that you can find them. So there's around 5,000 to 6,000 of these. You don't really know exactly an accurate number, just because it's hard to, sometimes some people count two as part of one, and we'll see what that looks like. But the area on the eastern part of the peninsula is a very large area to find cenotes. Around 2,000 or so are found right there in the Maya Rivera. About half of all the cenotes are found there. In the northern part of the peninsula is almost a perfect semicircle disbursements of these open cenotes. And the leading theory of how these got here in almost a perfect semicircle is because they're part of a full circle that was caused by an asteroid that killed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago that would have blasted rock when it hit in the Gulf of Mexico way up in the sky and landed in a perfect semicircle around. And those big heavy rocks sitting on top of that soft limestone would, as it rained and water collected under it, would keep cutting down and down and down, causing those big open cenotes, as one we saw earlier evidence. Okay, so we're going to see all three types here, examples of three different types. This is the first one. We're going to jump in the water, so I hope everyone brought their bathing suits with them today. We're going to swim around this open cenote and then back out. Now, this one is actually a saltwater cenote, so let's jump in. So again, the water in this one is salt water, not fresh water. And because of that, we're going to see a lot of marine life in this cenote. And specifically, we're going to see baby marine life, or juvenile. So what we see is a lot of juvenile fish. And these are the species of fish that we find out in the open ocean, out in the Caribbean, around coral reefs, for example. So many of these are reef fish that grow up as juveniles in the roots of these trees. And so they come to these open cenotes. And how do they get here? So how do they get inland from the ocean? Well, remember that limestone is porous. That means it has lots of holes and underwater passages that sometimes connect these open cenotes to the ocean. And so they can find their way in here, and it's a good, safe place for them. Now, birds do come here to prey upon them, but it does protect them from large fish that can't swim through those small openings to these open cenotes. So once they are ready to go back to the open ocean, they'll swim back out. Now, what's really neat are these trees. So we are talking about mostly geological formations and things like that today, but we do want to mention these because these are really neat. These are called red mangrove trees, is the type of tree this is. But mangroves are just a general term. Mangroves is a general term that we give to any tree or shrub that is saltwater tolerant. That's right. So this is salt water. And you can try this experiment too. Take any normal plant at school and give it salt water every day. That plant is going to die. Most plants cannot, with salt dissolved into water, most plants cannot survive once it brings salt into it. But mangrove trees can, and not because that they like salt water, but they have adapted to filter out. In the case of the red mangrove, they can filter out the majority of the salt out of the water. So they take mostly just fresh water in. And what they'll do is a little bit of salt comes into them, and every now and then you'll see a yellow leaf. And what they do is they sacrifice a leaf. So they'll push all the salt that they do bring in to one leaf and then drop the leaf. So it's a pretty cool adaptation for a tree. And if you guys don't think trees are cool, let me tell you something. This is a cool tree. This tree right here, the red mangroves, not a lot of people know this, but they don't drop seeds. They actually give live birth. So we call them, they're viviparous. So that's a big science word for you guys. So they actually grow a living little mangrove and drop straight down into the water, and then it floats along before it finds a place to take root and live. How cool is that? Have you ever heard a tree giving live birth? Well, it's true, guys. They do exist. Red mangroves can be found in probably about as north as they go is around Jacksonville, Florida. So you typically are only going to find them in the southern part of eastern United States. Another group of animals that comes here is humans. And so humans come here for recreation, and part of that is scuba diving. So anyone in the audience ever been scuba diving before?
Nope.
No? Does anyone want to go scuba diving?
Yeah.
All right. So scuba diving is one of my favorite activities. It's really like being in a different world. It's really super cool. Just my recommendation for everyone is, and you have to really, is it takes a lot of training. So definitely get proper training to go out and learn how to scuba dive. But snorkeling, like we're doing now, is another great activity to go and get out there and research and explore marine environments and places like cenotes. What's really cool here was this is a great example of how, we talked about open, semi-closed, and closed cenotes, but sometimes they can change from one type to another, specifically if they start off as a closed cenote. And this is what we kind of have some evidence here. So if you're using your observation skills here, you see big old rock boulder just sitting down, and we've seen these all over in the video so far. So you can imagine how this was once a closed cenote, meaning it was all underground. And what happens is the water comes through and runs in these underwater river systems that eats out from the rock. Remember, it's dissolving the minerals from the rock and it's cutting it away. And what happens over time is once the roof becomes too heavy to hold up, then it can collapse and fall in on itself. And what once was a closed cenote now is an open cenote, as we can see here with the empty space there. All right. And so it doesn't always collapse. Sometimes people ask me, can you go from an open to a closed? Well, I think you would have to actually take human intervention and actually build a roof of a cave back over this. It would be hard to go the other way. All right, as we see our scuba divers here, one of the benefits of coming to a cenote to learn how to scuba dive, it's like a safe environment. There's not a lot of, because it's in land here, there's no wave action. So it's kind of like a big pool. So it's a good place to come and learn how to scuba dive. And many of these people, they are practicing to go to a closed or a semi-closed environment. And that's called cave diving. So this is one of the most popular places in the world. Remember, 7 of those top 10 longest underwater river systems in the world are found right here in the Yucatan. And one of those is our next location. It's called Dos Ojos. Dos Ojos. Do we have any Spanish speakers here? Does anyone know what Dos Ojos means?
2 eyes.
All right, 2 eyes. Great. And so if what we're looking at here is we're looking at a map of the water of Dos Ojos. But if we were to fly over Dos Ojos, so this is in the middle of the forest, and if we were to fly over here on an airplane, and it would look like 2 holes in the ground in the tree canopy. So in the tops of the trees, we would see 2 holes basically. And that's where it gets its name from, Dos Ojos, so 2 eyes. And what we're going to do is we're going to enter Dos Ojos up here in our top right. This is a semi-closed cenote. We're going to swim around. We're going to check out some different rock formations that we're going to learn about. And right about here, we're going to see some scuba divers, and they are scuba diving into a complete cave environment going back and forth between the 2 eyes. And so that is what we call cave diving. And cave diving is the most dangerous part of scuba diving, of all scuba diving. That's because, if anything bad happens, like if your equipment fails, you can't just, if you're underwater in a cave, you just can't come up and get air. If you're completely underwater. So that's why it's considered the most dangerous of scuba diving types. Anyways, we'll continue on and we'll go underwater just a little bit ourselves on our snorkels here. And we're going to go into this area. And this is called the Bat Cave. And I'll give you an idea. You can guess to your friends why it's called the Bat Cave. But this is a closed cenote. So we'll get an idea of what a closed cenote looks like. All right, so before we head into these Dos Ojos, we do want to learn a couple more vocabulary words for today. So we're going to see 3 different types of rock formations that are very typical to find in caves. So another one of my favorite recreational activities is caving. So caving is really fun, and it's really like exploring another world. And so cenotes are cool because they're caves and water. It's awesome. But we're going to talk about these 3 rock formations. The first one is called a stalactite. What's it called? All right, the next one is a stalagmite. What's it called? And the last one is a column. What's it called? All right, so these are all 3 related, and let's talk about how they form. Remember when we were at Yerve el Agua and we were talking about how rock minerals dissolves into water? Same thing happens in cave systems. So we have groundwater that's dripping in on the ceilings, and as that water drips down, it forms what looks like an icicle coming down from the ceiling. But this is actually hard rock, and these types of hard rock formations are called stalactites. And what happens as it drips from the ceiling, it leaves behind a little bit of mineral, just a little teeny bitty bit. And over time, it grows and grows and grows. Well, it grows about 1/4 to an inch, anywhere between 1/4 of an inch to an inch every 100 years. Okay, so once we see a big old long stalactite, that took hundreds of years to form. Well, usually at the bottom of where a stalactite is, you have a stalagmite, because that water that's dripping down drips down to the ground, and these form in the reverse direction. So they're forming upwards, not downwards. So as the water drips on the bottom of the floor, it leaves behind, where it drips and splatters, a little bit of mineral. And over time, that little bit of mineral stacks up on top of each other, and it forms what's called a stalagmite. Now, these 2 words are really close to each other, and they're really, but I have a really cool technique to show you how to tell the difference between the 2. This is the way I remember. I look at that word mite, and I think of little bugs crawling around on the ground, and that's how I remember the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite. Now, over many, many hundreds of years, when they grow and connect, and it will happen, that when they grow and connect, then it becomes a column. So those are our 3 rock formations that we're going to see in our next cenotes. All right, so let's travel to Dos Ojos. And so we're at a different location now, and this is a semi-closed cenote that we're about to jump in. We can see it's partially open and partially closed. That's why it's called a semi-closed. Now, this water that we're going to swim in now is fresh water, not salt water. Woo! All right, it's a little chilly. It's about 77 degrees, this water. And again, it's fresh water. What's really unique about this area of the world and these cenotes is the water typically is really clear, but as you see, it's still dark. So we need to use flashlights because it is semi-closed. It's really dark in here. And because of its clear water, we call that, and when you go scuba diving, you say it's good visibility or good viz, man. And so it has really good viz or visibility. So that's why these are really popular to come scuba diving in for cave diving. Now, right here is we see a rock formation that is dripping down, kind of like an icicle. And who remembers, what are those called? Right, stalactites. Awesome, guys. Now, you may be asking yourself, wait a minute, this is underwater. How do you have a stalactite form? Because water doesn't drip underwater. You can't put a glass of water underwater and pour out the glass of water, right? You just can't do that. So water's not dripping. So how did it form? Well, you know, if we use put our best thinking caps on, this cave was once a completely dry cave. So right now where we're underwater used to be above water. And so the stalactite formed when it was still out of water, but today it's underwater. So that's how these formed. But if we look up at the ceiling, we see ones that are currently forming from the ceiling that are out of water. All right, so we're about to meet or come upon some scuba divers. And again, cave diving is really dangerous, and partly because although there's really good visibility here, there's all kinds of problems that can arise when you go cave diving. So as we see them practicing here, one of the things is water isn't always clear like we find in these cenotes. So sometimes it's really, really murky, and sometimes you can only see a couple inches or a foot in front of your face. And because of that, they put these lines in caves. So right here, so here's a good shot. So this string that we see here, this is a common technique for navigating underwater caves for scuba divers. And the way they do this, obviously someone has to do it first, but once they install these lines in the caves, the way that you navigate is you make an OK sign. So I know everyone's really jealous of my artistic abilities. I know. You guys will get here one day. Don't worry. All right. So if you make an OK sign with your hands, and if you make an OK sign around that string, so that means the string is going through the O of your OK, and you never let your O, you don't break your O ever. And if you always keep your O closed, that line is always going to be in between your O. So even if you can't see, the water's really muddy and murky and you can't see in front of you, you can know you're going in the correct direction by using these lines. So that's what they're doing here. They're practicing navigating underwater caves with these lines. All right, so we're going to check out some columns, some more rock formations that are now underwater, but they were once out of water because they had to form in the first place. And we're going to head back and go into the bat caves now. And the bat caves, as we look around, I'm going to shine my light on the wall here, the ceiling. Everyone follow this light with your eye and see if you can tell why this place is called the Bat Cave. All right, so if you guys see those bats flying around, all right, so this is called the Bat Cave because of those bats, and because of those bats, they drop something to the ground. This is a little so a nature documentary was shot here, and they installed these to shoot with cameras. That's why they're here. But you can see on top of the wood here is bat droppings, and bat droppings has a really fancy word. It's called guano, and it was a fancy word for bat poop. And so we have this guano here, and they also drop food when they eat. So these aren't blood-sucking bats. These are like fruit bats. So they bring fruit back in the cave, and they drop fruit and droppings. And this is at the bottom of the water, so you can see the bat droppings on the bottom of the water. And because of that, fish eat it. And because fish eat it, that helps them live. So people often ask me, where do these fish get food? And they're getting it from the bats. And we call that another big fancy science word, as we see our little fish friend here. There he is, swimming around in the dark. That fish is getting food from the bats. And because it's getting food from the bats, we call that symbiosis. Can everyone say symbiosis? All right, so symbiosis is when two organisms, in this case, we have a fish and a bat, and someone is happy. In this case, the fish is happy because it's getting food. And sometimes both organisms benefit. They're both happy. And then sometimes one doesn't care. So the bat doesn't really care about the fish. It's really indifferent. But the fish is happy because of the bat. And sometimes you have a relationship where one is sad and one is happy. And this is a good example of, has anyone ever had a tick in the summertime, for example? Well, that tick is happy. Who is not happy? That's right, you are not happy. So that's an example of a relationship where one organism is not happy and one is happy. And again, we call that symbiosis. All right, symbiosis. Okay, and so those are semi-closed, closed, and open cenotes. And we're going to jump right in and just show you really quickly Árbol del Tule, which is the widest tree in the world, and jump right into our geo quiz. And if you have time to stick around, you can head out at any time, but we're going to open up the floor for questions as long as we have them coming in afterwards. All right, so this tree is around 2,000 years old. It's not not the oldest tree in the world, but it is very old. And it is the widest tree in the world. So right here is 14.05 meters diameter. So for our younger classrooms, if we draw a circle and we measure the distance across a circle, that's called a diameter. And in this case, it is 14 meters, which is 45 feet in diameter. That makes it the widest tree in the world. All right. And so it holds the world's record. And when we look at it, it's so wide that I had to use a fancy wide camera angle lens to even get it all into one shot. Cannot even get it into one shot. This is a normal camera lens. And if you take a walk around the tree, so if you walk all the way around a circle or measure all the way around a circle, that is called the circumference of a circle. So if you take off walking one direction and you walk all the way around and come back to where you started, you would walk 190 feet roughly. So it's about 190 feet in circumference. And again, the widest tree in the world. This is an evergreen or a coniferous tree, and it's a cypress. It's a kind of a cypress tree. So these are the cones that it uses for its reproduction. And let's check it out. So as we can hear, lots of birds call this tree home. This is a water cypress tree, and so it likes the water. Wait a minute, I don't see any water around here. That's because the Spanish, when they came to this area of Oaxaca a long time ago, they drained all the wetlands and started farms and villages and all sorts of things. And but these trees like water, so they have sprinklers that are going on. And in fact, one of the nicknames for this tree traditionally here is Old Man in the Water. And as we see that water puddling up. And so it's a big old tall tree as well. I mean, it's 137 feet tall, but it's not the tallest. It's not taller than the redwood trees in California, for example. And when you come here, if you ever get the opportunity to come here, fantastic. I definitely recommend it. If you have the option of choosing when you come here, if you come the second Monday of October every single year, they have the Festival of Tule Tree, and they have music that plays and lots of celebrations that happen for the Festival of Arbol del Tule. All right, we're going to jump right into, we're just over 45 minutes. I know there's lots of questions out there, and we're going to get to as many as we can. After our quiz, we're going to go ahead and launch that for any classrooms that need to go ahead and run, so they have an opportunity to play. See how well you guys were paying attention today on our Geo quiz. The winner will get a postcard from me, GOB, from the Learn Around the World Studios. If you're not logged in yet, this is your last chance. Game pin at Kahoot.it is 362-8834. Every question is worth points. The quicker you answer correctly, the more points you get. Let's do it, guys. What is the name of the cave formation that drips down from ceilings? Is it stalactite, stalagmite, or column? All right, it is a stalactite. Great job, Lucky Turtle. How old is the tree, Arbol del Tule? Is it about 100, 1,000, 2,000, or 200 years old? All right, it's about 2,000 years old. Rockstar Dragon takes the lead. Is the boiling water at Yerve El Agua really hot? Okay, no, it is not hot. Rockstar Dragon still in the lead. What kinds of cenotes are there? They're open, semi-closed, closed, or open, closed, and semi-closed. All right, blue, all of those. Bold Moose takes the lead. Which Mexican state is Yerve El Agua and Arbol del Tule located in? Is it red, Yucatan, blue, Chihuahua, yellow, Oaxaca, or green, Chiapas? All right, it is in Oaxaca, Oaxaca. Great job, or they are in Oaxaca. And today's winner is, dun, 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 Bold Moose. Congratulations, Bold Moose. If you are Bold Moose's teacher, then Bold Moose, yeah, I guess I would be right. Bold Moose's teacher, then please send me your school address. You can do it in one place and one place only. That's at learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. Learnaroundtheworld.com/prize. Enter in your school address on that Google form located on that webpage, and I'll get that postcard sent right out to you. For everyone else that's still here, we're going to open up the floor, get to as many questions as we possibly can. Everyone's coming in. Let's see. Mrs. Suzuko's classroom, shout out to you guys in at Liberty Elementary. Welcome. Let's see. Let's see. Do we know how old the springs are? The springs that I think you're talking about, Yerba Agua. I know that for instance, the Zapotec, which were the indigenous people of the area in Oaxaca, they've been using Yerba Agua as a source of fresh water for a long time. People have been in this part of the world for well over 1,000 years, and probably longer. They've been using these springs. So it's groundwater. So people often ask me, like, how does a spring exist? Has anyone ever heard of a well before? How do wells work? And it all works because of the water cycle. And the water cycle, the way that it works is when it rains, right? Water has a few options of where it can go. So if we have on the land and then it rains during a rainstorm, so water can go a number of areas. One is it can run off into a river or stream, right? And then continue its journey to the ocean or to a lake, for example. Another option is it can percolate into the ground, percolation, and it can collect underground into groundwater. So groundwater is how things like a well works, for example. So if you build a house and you build a well, that's a horrible color. So if you build a house and beside your house, if you build a well, the way a well works is you dig into the ground until you tap into the well water. So in the old days, you would lower a bucket to scoop out the water, right, in the well. But nowadays, it's like a pipe and a pump. A pump pumps it up into your house, right? That's how a well works when you tap into groundwater. So in this case, Yerba Agua, the way a natural spring works is kind of similar. So the way that it would work is you would have groundwater, and at some point, that groundwater is basically getting tapped into by just the formation of the land. So the land cuts down and taps into the groundwater. So right here, for example, you would have a spring that bubbles up. So this happens, I'm sure near everyone's home at some point or another. You've been hiking. If you like to hike, for example, you go out into the woods, and or sometimes it happens if sometimes on the side of a highway where they cut a highway into the side of a hill, sometimes you see water just coming out of the side of the hill. Where's it coming from? Well, that's a spring that was created and is coming from the groundwater. So great question there. Also, what does juvenile mean? Okay, juvenile just means young. So you guys, most of you today that are watching are juvenile. You're juvenile humans. You're young people. So juvenile fish are kids. They're young kids. So they haven't grown up yet. Great questions coming in from there as well. Let's go ahead and check out. Let me just check Twitter really quickly. I can find it. Make sure we don't have any unanswered questions over there. Don't see any questions over on Twitter. All right, so we'll come back. And let's see, what else do we have here? What kinds of minerals are found in limestone? There's different types of limestone. Calcium is a big one because typically limestone is, for example, is when we have land that was once at the bottom of an ocean, and much of the limestone is caused by when you have calcium from things like different kinds of seashell, coral reef, for example. These are all things that are constructed out of calcium, calcium carbonate, officially. And so when those old seashells, everything gets crushed up at the bottom of the ocean, we're talking in the processes that takes millions of years, and those form into hard rock, forms into limestone with heat and pressure, with all those millions of years old of seashells, shark teeth, all kinds of different things. And then when you have an uplifting, or in our case, the oceans get lower, and then you have land that is on dry land now. So we have limestone, and limestone is fresh water will eat right through that stuff, and salt water as well, because much of that mineral would get redissolved back into the water. Let's see, Mrs. Smith's classroom wants to know how many trees in the same area as the wide as the one. Okay, so how many of those cypress trees are that wide? So they can get really wide, but as a general, they're not like, I would say overall, probably sequoia trees are typically wider than these types of trees. But this specific one has gotten really, really wide. And part of that is because of the age of it, and just whatever the conditions, how everything just kind of combines together. So the weather, the nutrients in the soil, this particular tree has just become super duper wide. and so, but I would say as a species, sequoia trees in general are a wider tree than these types of cypress trees, but they can get, other ones are wide as well. And let's see, did that one. How high are the cliffs? And maybe you're talking about from Yerve El Agua. I don't know exactly how high the highest points of those cliffs are. I would say that they're probably anywhere between, because they change, depends on what part you measure from, but if I had to guess, I would say they're around 60 to 100 feet high. They can probably be a little bit higher. The one I showed off in the distance of the Cascade Formation that went straight down, that one was probably over 100 feet. Yeah. All right, and looks like that's all the questions that we have for now. So we're going to end and wrap it up and call it a day. Thank you for everyone for traveling to Mexico with us on the Geo Show today. Go ahead and use this as an opportunity to get inspired to go out there and learn about all kinds of natural wonders we have in the world and in Mexico. If you get the opportunity one day, definitely visit Mexico if you've never been. Fabulous country, beautiful people, amazing food, one of my favorite places to visit. Until next time, I'm GOB. You've been watching the Geo Show. It's a big world out there, so keep exploring. Have a great weekend, explorers. Goodbye.